All right, welcome to another synthesis tutorial video. We're still on subtractive synthesis, but this time we're going to look at building a pad. So a pad is a synth patch that typically has a very, very long attack and release time and is used to provide a lot of backing sounds in a track. Generally, it's going to have some sort of modulation in there which will create additional interesting harmonic content. So think something that you would hear in Rush, and you're probably pretty close to that. So to start off, again, I have my MIDI to CV and my Audio 8. If you're following along for my class at Montana State, you will need to use different modules from the stock VCV ones for all of your choices, and definitely different ones from what I'm using as well. So let's start patching. So we're going to need a VCO, so I'm going to reset my filters, and we're going to search for a voltage-controlled oscillator, or VCO. And I really want to use one that has pulse width modulation, so I'm going to use the Bog Audio, which has a square wave, but it does have a pulse width CV input as well, and that's the important thing that I really need. So I'm just going to connect that up to my volts per octave, and then let me show you why this is so important. So if I connect that to my scope and then I adjust the pulse width, I change the duty cycle of on versus off for the pulse width modulation, or square wave, if it's at exactly 50%. And that results in some really interesting harmonic changes. So let me run this into a VCA real quick. And from the VCA, I'll use that so that we don't blow out eardrums or anything similar. So I'm just going to take that all the way down, and then we're going to send that into 1 and 2, and I'm going to take a copy of that so you can see the waveform. So yeah, it's a really cool sound. I really, really like playing around with square waves for pad sounds. So let's take that, and I'm just going to start disconnecting things for now because, yeah, we're going to make some changes to this. I'll also move my scope down because while it's interesting, it's not particularly required for the rest of this. So the next thing that I do need, however, is I don't want to have to keep changing the pulse width by hand. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an LFO. That's a low frequency oscillator, which is an oscillator that's generally going to operate below the range of human hearing. And using that, I'll be able to take that and send it into my control voltage input and use that to modulate the pulse width modulation up and down automatically. So I'm going to grab the 4 LFO. This is also Bog Audio. And this is a really, really cool one. I'm going to set it at a lower frequency. Then I'm going to send the output to the pulse width modulation knob. And then let's set it to a sine wave. And then we're going to increase this, to about 25-ish, so 68%-ish. So now what's happening is we're modulating the waveform. And I'm going to take, output goes to the input. I'm going to take that, I'm going to send that to the input, and we can hear this change now. So yeah, that's a really cool sound. I really, really like that. I can have a lot of fun with that. It's generating some really rich harmonics. Yeah, it's just fun. But we need some other stuff before we can really make use of this. So I need an ADSR envelope generator, which I'm going to connect to my gate from MIDI to CV. Then we're going to use that to control the CV gain of my VCA. And I'm going to take the level all the way up to 100%, and that should be fine. Now remember, with a pad, we need a relatively long release time and a relatively long attack time. Decay, you can take it or leave it. I really don't think it's as necessary as the others are. So we'll set those roughly to about half a second for the decay, about a second for the attack, and a little longer, about 2.5 seconds for the release. Then I need a filter. So let's do a filter. And I think, which one do I want? Yeah, let's use the Twin Peaks filter, because one, that is a great television show and you should absolutely watch it, and two, it's actually a really cool filter that allows you to have two different filters and do some cool stuff with it. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to take my signal from my VCO and send that to the input. Then I'm going to send the output to my VCA. And here, that sounds pretty cool, but it could be a little bit better. And the way that we could make this better is I could control the frequency of my cutoff, which is currently in a low pass, I could control that with the envelope. So now we're going to have a little bit more interesting sound as I slowly ramp that up. Well, let's take it down a bit. Okay, that sounds like a little too much resonance for my taste, so I'm going to take that down as well, so we're not in self-oscillating territory. That's a little bit better. Okay. All right, so that sounds pretty good, but I do like my pads to have a little bit of reverb, just to be a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to go and I'm going to find a classic spring reverb, and we're going to use that. Move that up here. So I'm going to take the output of my VCA. I'm going to take those cables and move them over to the mix output, and that's going to send everything with the mix knob over to the actual audio output. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the audio and I'm going to send that into the input. So I'm going to go from VCA channel 1 to channel 1 input. And then to control this, I could just play it and adjust the level manually. And then adjust the amount of dry versus wet. But I think what would be a little bit cooler with this would be if we have that synced to our reverb. So I'm going to take a copy of this reverb output that's controlling the pulse width modulation, and I'm going to send that to the mix CV over in the spring verb. So I just hold down Command and we patch it up, and now it's going to modulate the dry wet amount by that LFO signal. So let's hear that. I'm going to crank the volume all the way up there. Then to play around with this, I could make some adjustments. I could get rid of the decay so that we just go straight to the sustain, which I'll put at 100%. And I could also play with the envelope shape. So let's get away from a straight up, nice linear shape, and let's go somewhere in between that and a exponential curve. Okay, so that sounds pretty cool. So again, this is just a basic pad demo. Play around with this, expand on this with your own ideas, and maybe try a different filter. I'm not really feeling like this is working as well as it could. We're kind of overshooting the CV amount, so that might be a little bit much. Maybe if I take my sustain level down. There we go. So try that out, see what you can come up with, and use this to create a really cool sounding pad. And remember to try different octaves as well on your MIDI keyboard, because some things might work a lot better in a lower register. Or in a higher register.